What is going on, everybody? My name is John Solo, and today on Messed Up Origins, we're discussing the very messed up origins of a little story called Bluebeard. That's right, you know it's a good episode when I put very in the title. If you haven't heard of this story, don't feel bad. The only reason I know of it is because members of the Solo fam have been asking me to talk about it for the past few months. It's a part fable, part horror story that follows a woman who finds out her rich new husband is actually a serial killer, then has to escape from his clutches. It's one of the first stories of its kind, and as it turns out, it may have been inspired by true events. And with that, it's time we get started. As always, don't forget to stab that like button just like Bluebeard would want you to. Subscribe with notifications turned on to have messed up content delivered to your sub box on a regular basis, and of course, enjoy. So the very first iteration of Bluebeard was written by French author Charles Perrault in 1697. We've talked about a few of his stories in the past if you want to check them out. Of course, his version was written in French, so we'll be looking at Andrew Lang's English translation, which was included in the collection of fairy tales he released in 1889 and stays true to the original. It starts by introducing us to a rich man who owns the finest versions of everything. Gold and silver dinnerware, golden stagecoaches, a limited edition holographic Dark Charizard. He had it all. Despite these riches though, women found this man to be horribly ugly because of his blue beard. It's a real shame he wasn't born in 2019 because at the very least he would have had his pick of smelly organic deodorant using hipster queens with leg hair longer than mine. Well, despite the challenges that came with his merman hairstyle, he was dead set on marrying one of his neighbor's two daughters, neither of whom were initially attracted to him. But after he treated them, their mother, and a group of their friends to an 8-day party in the woods at one of his many luxurious cabins, one of them finally said, "Fine, I guess riches beyond my wildest dreams are worth staring at that ugly blue beard every day. And besides, maybe I can convince him to shave." The first month of the couple's relationship went rather smoothly, but one day Bluebeard told his new wife, who we'll call Penelope, that he was going away on a business trip for 6 weeks. He told her to gather some friends and have another party in the woods until he returned, then gave her the keys to everything he owned. All of his apartments, strong boxes filled with diamonds and gold, his holographic Dark Charizard, you get it. The only thing he told her not to open was the little closet at the end of the hall, and he said that if she did, she would feel his justified wrath. That's not terrifying at all. So Penelope invites her friends over, and they waste no time going through every room of the house to admire Bluebeard's possessions. But while they're busy auditing the place, she sneaks away to the closet she was forbidden from entering. She paused for a moment and pondered her husband's words and what misery might come down upon her if she were to open the door, but she couldn't help it. His house was filled with the finest treasures anyone could have, and they were all sitting out in the open. What could be so valuable that it was locked away for no one to see but him? Was it the room from the Matrix with all the TVs? Was it Christian Grey's playroom? Creepy fucking name for it, by the way. No, after she opened the door and her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she perceived the true definition of horror. The floor of the room was stained with clotted blood, and hanging from the walls were the corpses of Bluebeard's 6 previous wives. Penelope was horrified at the sight, and in a panic, she dropped the key in a pool of blood. She then closed the door and locked it, but the key now had blood all over it. No matter how hard she tried, it wouldn't wash off. And as luck would have it, Bluebeard came back from his business trip early that same evening. The next morning, he asked his wife for the keys back, and she gave them to him. Well, all of them except for the one to the closet. And he responded, babe, you forgot the most important key of all." At Bluebeard's insistence, she then handed it over, and when he saw the blood, he was immediately furious. Despite her denying, he knew she entered the closet and told her she'd be joining the women she saw down there. Penelope begged and pleaded for her life and swore she would never disobey him again, but all he had to say was, "You must die, madam, at once." She responded, "If I must die, then give me a moment to say my prayers." And he replied, "I'll give you half a quarter of an hour and nothing more." To which I would have responded, "Half of a quarter of an hour? 7.5 minutes? Really? You can't just round up?" I think that's actually a mistranslation because in every other version of the story I read, he gave her a quarter of an hour and not half a quarter of an hour, but I'm gonna roll with half a quarter because I think it's funnier. When he left her alone in her chambers, she called out to her sister Anne, the last of her friends still lingering on the property for some reason, and told her to go to the watchtower and keep an eye out for their brothers, whom she told to visit that day. Well, the 7.5 minutes go by and Anne still hasn't seen their brothers, so what happens next is a weird interaction that I can only tell in the following way. "Your 7.5 minutes are up, Penelope. Get ready to die." "Okay, I'll be down in 1 second. Annie, do you see our brothers?" "No." "I said come here, Penelope. I want to make this quick so I can start dinner. I'm having gabagool." "Sorry, I'll be there soon. Annie, how about now?" "I think so. No, those are just sheep." Confound it, Penelope. If you don't come here right now, I'm coming to you. Okay, I'm on my way. Annie, do you see them yet? Yes, they're on their majestic steeds. I'll signal for them to hurry. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that was actually pretty close to how it happened. Penelope then went downstairs to Bluebeard and threw herself at his feet, begging for another chance, but the man had no mercy. He grabbed her by the hair, pulled back his sword, and was ready to chop the poor girl's head off when both brothers burst through the door. Being that they were both soldiers in the British Army, Bluebeard knew he wouldn't stand a chance against them, so he tried to run away, but the brothers took him down and proceeded to stab the psychopath to death. Since Bluebeard had no heirs, his wife was the one who inherited his entire estate, and she used part of it to marry her sister Anne to a fine young lad who she'd been crushing on for a while. She bought captain's commissions for her brothers, whatever those are, and used the rest to marry herself to a very fine and worthy gentleman. And despite where you may have thought this story was going when it started, everyone lived happily ever after. Except for Bluebeard and his 6 dead wives. And their families. What a great fable. I'm surprised that Disney hasn't adapted this one. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely not the perfect story. There's a few hard to get over flaws in logic, like where did all of Penelope's friends go during the 5-minute window that she was checking out the corpse closet, and why was her sister the only one who stuck around? And why did Bluebeard give her time to pray and continue to say just 1 more minute when he seemed so dead set on killing her as soon as possible? It's details like these that Iona and Peter Opie cite as evidence that Perrault's version may not have been the first iteration of the story. It was definitely the first written one, but it was their belief that someone told it to him and he just recorded it imperfectly. And I think that makes sense, being that the majority of fables we know nowadays were passed on in that exact same way, just with the plot holes fixed by the time they got to us. For example, there's another version written by Eugene Bossard in 1886, so much later than Perrault, where the reason Bluebeard lets his wife leave and takes so long to come back down is because she's putting on a wedding dress, which during the time the story takes place was customary to be buried and even executed in. So from Bluebeard's perspective, she had already resigned herself to that fate. But if I'm being totally honest, it's not that fun to scrutinize these 100-plus-year-old stories with 2019 storytelling standards, similar to how it's f***ing insane to judge someone for something they tweeted 10 years ago when the social and political climate were completely different. Yeah, I said it, but just because we're not overanalyzing plot holes doesn't mean there isn't more for us to analyze. So let's move on to part 2, shall we? So if you were to guess what the moral of Bluebeard was, what would you say? I'll give you a second to think about it. If you guessed, don't give your wife the keys to your corpse closet, you'd be wrong. And I would be concerned. But if you guessed, curiosity leads to regret and terrible consequence, you'd be right. And I would be really impressed. What's interesting about this moral is that it's actually pretty common, especially with female protagonists. There's the myth of Pandora's box, where Pandora released sickness, death, and other evils on the world. There's Eve, who ate the forbidden fruit and thus doomed humanity to a mortal life full of pain and suffering. Nice job. And there's about a dozen made-for-TV movies with this theme, like Lethal Vow, starring John Ritter and Marge Hamburger. There's one tale in particular I want to discuss though, and that's basically England's equivalent of France's Bluebeard, and that's Mr. Fox, written by Joseph Jacobs in 1890. It begins by introducing the reader to Lady Mary, who had 2 brothers and more lovers than she could count. Nice. Out of Mary's literally countless lovers, the only one she truly cared for was the rich and mysterious Mr. Fox, whom she agreed to wed. One day, while Mr. Fox was out on business, Mary went looking for his castle, which he had described to her before, but never told her where it was. After searching for much of the day, she found it and thought it was quite extravagant. High walls, surrounded by a moat, the whole shebang. She entered the gateway, the front door, and then approached a door in the gallery. Each entryway had a sign above it that had parts of the phrase, be bold, but not too bold, lest that your heart's blood should run cold, inscribed on it. Do you get the feeling that there's some impending danger here? Well, Lady Mary doesn't catch that vibe, so she goes into the next room and discovers it's filled with corpses of dead women. Mary figures, well, I'd better skedaddle, and started to leave, but on her way out, she sees through the window who else but Mr. Fox dragging a woman by her hair to his castle. Mary has to hide behind a big barrel so her future husband doesn't see her, and she witnesses him trying to steal his victim's diamond ring and resorting to cutting off her entire hand when he can't. What's particularly disgusting is that when he chops off the hand, it soars through the air and lands on Mary's lap. But fortunately, she's able to stifle her scream, and Mr. Fox isn't all that dedicated to finding the hand for whatever reason, so he just goes back to dragging the corpse to his victim vault, and Mary escapes. This next detail might surprise you, but she agrees to have dinner with Mr. Fox a few days later, only she requests that her brothers join her as well. Then at dinner, she begins to recall her visit to his castle as if it were a dream, and she straight up tells him that she saw him dragging a corpse and cutting off its hand. To which Mr. Fox responded, weird. Didn't happen though. Then Mary drops the bomb, saying, actually it did happen and I have the hand to prove it, and points it at him. I don't know if that means she just showed him the hand or she positioned the index finger so it was pointing at him, but I'm gonna go with the second one. Then, before Mr. Fox even had time to react, her brothers jumped from their seats and chopped him into 1,000 pieces. The end. Now, being that the Mr. Fox and Bluebeard stories have so much in common, it probably won't surprise you to hear that they can be categorized under the same tale type. ATU 312, women whose brothers rescue them from their ruthless husbands or abductors. A detail that's unique to Bluebeard though is that it may have been inspired by a real killer. I know, spoopy. So let's talk about that. Now, just to reiterate, we're not 100% certain that Bluebeard was a real person, but some believe his story had to come from somewhere, and these are the two most popular theories about where. His first potential identity is Gilles de Rais, a French nobleman who, whether he was a psychopathic killer or not, lived an insane life. At the age of 16, he saved the life of the Duke of Brittany, and he was given massive land grants as a reward. He fought alongside Joan of Arc, and was so rich by the time he was 30 that he gave up all monetary pursuits and began studying dark magic. Allegedly, it's when he entered this new field of study that he started to go a little crazy and began kidnapping, molesting, and murdering children in the name of sacrifice. He went on to be found guilty of 140 counts of murder and was eventually hanged. Gilles de Rais' life inspired many a legend in France, and it's thought that the story of Bluebeard could be one of them. Outside of being wealthy murderers though, the two don't have that much in common, so others say, nah, they probably aren't the same person. Another individual whose murder spree resembles Bluebeard's a little bit more is Connemar the Cursed, who lived around the year 500. He was a local chieftain who was married 5 times before being wed to his ally's daughter, Tryphene, or Tryphene. I have no idea how to pronounce that name. Their marriage started out okay, but at some point Tryphene found out that Connemar had killed his 4 previous wives because they were pregnant, and she was pregnant, so she got the fuck out of there. But after Connemar discovered that Tryphene abandoned him, he tracked her down and gave her a big chop with his sword, cutting off her head. But according to legend, her head was somehow reattached and she was nursed back to health by a saint from a local church, and after a time, she became a saint as well. Then, depending on the version you read, either her son grew up to become a saint, or he was hunted down and killed by Connemar after his mother had died, then Connemar was killed in battle. So we've got a Frenchman who was the subject of local legend, killed 4 of his wives, was found out by his 5th wife, and almost killed her. It may not be enough in the minds of everybody to say he is for sure Bluebeard, but if the story was inspired by someone, he is certainly a viable option. So that, Solo fam, was the very messed up origins of Bluebeard. Now tell me, was I right to use the word very in the title? Personally, I say yes, but let me know your thoughts on that and everything else we talked about in the comments down below. Also, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for new messed up content in your sub box every single week, and share this video with someone you know who would like it. When you're through with all that, I'd also recommend you follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram to stay updated on what's going on with the channel or my life. Gunther is not having this today. And follow Gunther as well, because who wouldn't want to see this mushy face on their timeline? Until next time, Solo fam, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon. As always, my name is John Solo, and remember, John shot first.